Hello everyone, welcome back. Today, what I thought I would do for teaching you guys some HTML and cascading style sheet is kind of back up a few steps and show you the entire process from beginning to end of putting together a simple website. So I took out a lot of the HTML out of the document that we worked with last time. And I also took out a lot of the cascading style sheet that we worked with last time, kind of just getting back to the very basics. So now the first thing that we want to do when we design a page is to sketch it out on paper, just back of a napkin or a piece of scrap paper, just to kind of scribble down some ideas. And then once you do that, you can do a basic wireframe. And I usually use Illustrator to do that. So what I did is, in Illustrator, I created this document and put the different squares and divisions of the page where I wanted them. This is not really going to be the final colors, and this will certainly not be the final text. The inside of the page will probably look different. But this is just enough to kind of give me a basic idea. And also, more importantly, to help me measure the different elements. That's the one thing that I make sure that I do exactly how I want it to look on the page. Because then I can take these measurements of these boxes and I can plug them into my cascading style sheet. So this is just a basic, simple design. This is actually going to be a photo, and these will be photos as well. But for this, they're just black boxes. This here is just some random Latin text that is actually called lorem ipsum, based off of the first two words that are in the text. And it's basically just space filler. Instead of actually using English text, which may be confused as the real text, when all it is supposed to do is show the font size and things like that. So in the design world, we use lorem ipsum text, which has the same look as English words, but it's all in Latin. So that helps us lay things out without actually putting in actual text. And I did the same thing over here and over here. So now we have a basic look. And we want to start dividing our page up into what div tags we're going to create. And I believe the first one obviously will be this header here. So if I click on it, and off of the screen where it's recording, I can read that this is 800 pixels wide by 200 pixels tall. So let's go over to our HTML, and the first thing we want to do is make a wrapper, because we need to make this entire huge box right here that contains everything, and this will be our body. So we go div id equals wrapper. Then we make sure we close that div off. And since that's going to contain everything, I give myself some nice big space in between. Now in the CSS, I already have the wrapper defined, so this is going to kick in and show the box immediately, since it's the same wrapper size that I used for our last page. Oops. Now, the next thing we want is our big photo that's going to go across the top. So it's going to be ID div ID, and let's call this header photo. And that's going to appear here, and since there's not any styling for it, it's just going to be a thin little box. Now let's rename this header photo. And we know that we wanted the height to be 200 pixels, like that. Now we could put a width in if we wanted to, but it is going to default to the width of its container. And right now the wrapper is its container. So we would only specify its width if that was causing us some problems, or if we wanted it to be smaller than its container. And having a background of white is just fine for now, since we're just laying out the basics. Now, inside of, if we look here, inside of this big photo box header, we have the actual menu bar. It's floating up here. So this is contained inside of this box. So we would put it here inside of this div tag. ID equals menu bar. Okay. And so we have the same thing. There's no styling for it yet. Let's go over here. And we're going to copy this and paste it. And that makes it a lot easier. I don't have to retype or paste. I can just rename it. And we're going to call it menu bar. And it's going to have a black background. So we want 6 zeros there. And it has a height of 200 just like this, and that's not what we want. I'm going to put 20 in here for now. I'm going to go over here and double check, and it says that its height is 40 and its width is 568. So this becomes 40. And we give it a width of 568. Oops. 568 pixels. Making sure I'm correct. Yep, 568. Okay. Now, we do not want it here on this side. We want it on the other side. And the default style is for the div tags and all of the items to line up on the left-hand side. But we want it to be on the right-hand side. So we're going to float this right. And there it is on the other side. Exactly where we want it. Now, we also want to push this down some, and I'm going to draw a small little box here and look at the height of this box, and it is 46 pixels. So we know that we want this 46 pixels down. Now there's two ways we can do this. I can say that I want the margin top to be 46 pixels. And that'll place it just like that. But I want to show you another way that you can also place things. I'm going to go up here to this position, and I'm going to type in the position tag. And I want this to be positioned relative. Now what that does is tell the HTML through the cascading style sheet that I want to actually designate the top and the left measurements from the top of the page down and from the left of the page over. Now this is already floated left, so I only need to designate the top. So for my position, it's already floated right, I'm sorry. I'm going to say top 46 pixels and see what that does. And that didn't do anything, did it? Let me preview this in Safari and see what happens. It's thinking about it for some reason. It says it cannot open the page. There we go. Okay. So Dreamweaver was having some problems with this top, but we can see here in Safari it didn't have a problem with it. So just be aware that there is more than one way of positioning an object on the screen. It can be positioned relative, and you can give it the dimensions of where it's positioned. Another one is it can be positioned absolute, and we can see how that affects it here in Safari. And you see that it took off the float and it just put it down from the top. The absolute and the relative pretty much do the same thing. It has to do with the way in which the object relates to its container. The other one that you can use is called fixed. Now if I do fixed and I come over here to Safari and I reload it, it doesn't look like it changed any. But if I move this and make this window smaller, and I actually have a scroll bar here, and I scroll the page, you will see that the bar does not change relative to the edges of the document window. It always stays 46 pixels down from the top of this window, and the rest of the page can move behind it. And that's a pretty neat trick. But for now, I want to go back, and I'm going to take off this, and I'm going to go back and tell it to give me a margin top of 46 pixels. And the reason I'm doing that is so that I can see exactly what it's going to look like in Dreamweaver. So Dreamweaver seems to be having some problems rendering that code. Okay. So now we have our bar, and we have this area down here where we need to put the body, or the content area. So we're going to still be inside the wrapper, and I'm going to create a div ID, and I'm going to call this the content. Now actually, if we were reading from left to right, and we came down here to the next area, the first thing we would see would be that menu bar. So I'm going to actually put the menu bar above it. And let's call this the left menu. Okay. Now, what we want to do is we do not see our boxes because I believe they are up here because we have a float. Because this menu bar is floating, these two div bars are probably right below it here, or they're actually above it here. But we want them down here where we can work with them. So we want to take our, let's copy and paste this again. And we're going to call this left menu. If I could spell correctly. Left menu. And let's take out all this formatting. And there is a tag, and I'm going to put it down here under Other, that is called Clear. And we want it to clear both. And basically what that's going to say to the HTML, or to the browser, is if there is anything that's floating left or right, up here above this thing, ignore it. Treat it like there is nothing floating, and start from there. And let's do the same thing with our content. Okay. So this isn't showing up. So I need to do some detective work and figure out where it is and why it is not showing up. So let's push our menu bar over a little bit. Because I believe it is hiding under there. So let's make this 700 pixels. And I still don't see it. Okay. That means I probably have something wrong with my HTML. Let's put some content in there. There they are. Okay. For some reason, these needed content to show up. And that's what you do a lot of times with HTML. Sometimes it doesn't quite work exactly how you think it should. So you just need to try a few tricks to make sure that you can see what you're expected to see. Okay, so let's take the width back off of here. Bring that back where it should be. Now we have our box is showing up, and I can probably even take this off. Yeah, I didn't need that. I thought that the float on this bar was hiding them underneath there, but it wasn't. They just weren't showing up for some reason. Okay, so now we're back on track. So the first thing we want to do is we have our left menu, and I can click on this and see that it is 190 pixels tall. I mean, it's 190 pixels wide. So let's put in a size, width, 190 pixels. And this box would be the rest of it, which would be make sure I got that right. Okay. 610 pixels. Okay. Now, I want my menu to be on this side, and I want my content to be on that side. So we are going to float this one right. We are going to float this one left. And now they line up right beside each other, because if one of these was a pixel too big, it would push itself down because it couldn't fit. But because I measured it and I entered in those measurements exactly, they fit right beside each other. Now, I don't want this to be a gray background. I want this to be a white background. Oops, that is not what I wanted. I changed the color of the wrong thing. The wrapper is what I want to change. Okay. Because I want to make the menu bar, the left menu, and I want to make that a gray color. Just a light gray for now. Okay, and I want the background of this to be white. Okay, so now I have my left menu bar in my content area basically laid out, and I want to make this content area the same height as whatever the container is. So I want its height to be 100%. And that will be 100% of whatever I put into it. And because it has nothing in it right now, it's just that big. But I want my left menu to come all the way down, no matter how much content it has in it, because it's not going to be completely filled up with text. It's only going to have its menu content near the top. So I want to make its height, let's start out 400 pixels and see what that looks like. Okay, let's try 500. 600. Okay. Now, doing well. Let's save this. So now we have our basic page, the very basic layout of our page. And now we want to go back, and I want to put the photo in here, and then I want to work with this right here. So we want to go up to our header photo, and in the background element, we want to choose a URL, and we want to go here. Okay, so here's all the files for our project right here. And I've already created an image that is the exact size that we need. So I will click OK. And boom. We have a nice, pretty, bright green leaf in our header. And let's change this color since now we're actually choosing correct colors. Let's choose, do we have a dark green? What will that look like? That'll do for now. We may change that again. Let's save this and see what it looks like in Safari. Yeah, that's a pretty nasty color green. We need to change that. And it looks like we need to work with this as well. That's not behaving properly. So, but we'll get there later. The next thing we want to do is, you will see on our little wireframe here that this actually sticks up above it and breaks into this header. And we can do that by giving this left menu bar and working with our margins. Let's do margin top, but I want to give it a negative margin. Let's give it a negative 40 pixels. And we've actually pulled it up, breaking over top of the div tag that is above it and pushing it up. And since we want to continue this all the way to the bottom, we need to add 40 pixels here as well. Now, let's see how that looks here in Safari. Perfect. Now, let's work with this content area. I'm going to take this height tag off, and that should fix that weirdness there. There we go. So we will just let that expand as we put content in it. We don't need to say 100% there. And I noticed that we have this is called untitled. So I need to go up here and call this test page. So at least it has some type of title for it. There we go. Perfect. So you can tell we've got this page, which is a basic layout, and this is all of the content we have in the body right now. Just a few simple div tags, and we were able to create a basic page. And I want to call this page title, if I could spell correctly. And I'm just going to say content here for now. There we go. And I'm going to call this menu. So we started putting a few words in. We can play with our text and our fonts. Okay, so our menu bar, we know that we want the color of our text to be white. Okay? And black text for now is good there. Okay, so we have our basic title and our content. And let's go in here. I'm just going to copy some of this text. And put that in there. And let's put this in a paragraph tag, since these are indeed paragraphs. And we can tell that this content is really huge. and it's pushing up all over the place, right up against the edges. So let's go down here to content. We're going to copy this so we don't have to retype all of that. And we don't care about any of this right now. We don't want it to have those attributes. And we want to style the paragraph tags inside of the content. And the first thing we want to do is say font size, let's say 10 pixels. Let's see what that does. There we go. A little small. Let's say 12. Okay. Now, you'll notice that we took off all the margins and the padding for all of our paragraphs up here at the top. So that's why all of our paragraphs run into each other like this. But for these, we want to restore some of that. So let's say margin 10 pixels. There we go. Now we have some separation of our paragraphs. And the other thing we needed here is the headline. So let's do H1, which is a headline tag in HTML. We're going to say headline. Now the H1 tag is already styled in HTML. It gives it certain attributes. So we're pretty much close, even though that is a little big. So let's go and put in and style our H1 tag. And let's just make it 16 points, a little bigger. Let's make it 20 points. There we go. So now we see that we are starting to style the text. And the next thing we want to do is put in a photo. Now I have a photo that I already put in. If I would click the right button. And let's say we want the photo to come in here. Image tag. That's what we want, SRC. And we're going to click this photo here. Now, we want to give it an alt tag. We're going to say hallway photo. And it's going to insert it right there. But that's not exactly what we want it to look like. So we're going to go back to our CSS, copy our content once again, and this time we want to target the IMG, the image tag, inside of our content wrapper. And we want those photos to float right. And I also want the size. I want the width to be, let's see, 200 pixels. And I want the height to be 200 pixels. Let's see what that does. There we go. Now, it is kind of pushing right up against the edge of the div tag, which I don't necessarily want. I want it to have a little bit of space. So, actually this should go up here under position. And this should be here. margins, 10 pixels. Boom. That gives us a little bit of breathing space around there. And we have to save our HTML as well. There we go. Okay. So we have our basic text starting to come together. I want to do a few more tweaks here with this, and then we will move on over here to the menu bar and the page title. With the text, the paragraph text, I want to change the line height. So there's a line height tag, and let's see, let me make it the same as the height of the font. Okay, let's make it 17. Okay, so we can start to play with the leading of these photos, of these lines of text, as well as the font size and stuff like that. So let's make it 13, make it a little bit bigger. And let's make this 19. Okay, a little bit easier to read. I like that. Okay, so now let's go back up to our menu bar. And we are going to do an unordered list. We're going to just call this, let's say, home. Products. Services. And contact us. Okay, and right now this is just a simple bulleted list. So we need to come back here, and we are talking about the menu bar. And we're basically going to do exactly the same thing that we did in the last video when we did the menu bar as well. So here's unordered list. Here is our list item. And we want to float these left. And we want to display block. Actually, we don't want to do that for this. We want to save that for something else. Okay, so we have it floated left. We want to do the list style to none. That takes away the bullet points there. And the next thing we want to do is make each one of these a link. Copy, paste, paste, paste. And then close each one of them off. And come down here. And we want to make the anchor tag display block. And we want to give it, the menu bar had a height of 40. Pixels. Okay. Now we want to take everything off of the UL, so we want to do margin 0 and padding 0, and that pops them up where they should be. Color needs to be white. There we go. And the text decoration, none. And that gets rid of our line. Now we need to give each of these margin left of 10 pixels. And that gives us some separation. And we need to make the width of our menu bar, the width is 568. Okay, so that makes that unordered list the same width, and so these buttons can spread out. And our text is a little high, so we need to push that down, and we will do that with padding top. And let's give that a padding of 10 pixels. And because, like we talked about last time, that adds to the overall height, we need to subtract 20 pixels from that. Oops. No, we only did the one, so we only need to subtract 10 and make that 30. There we go. So now let us look at our page. Boom, we have some nice styled text there. Copy this. Give this a pseudo class of hover. We can take all this stuff out. We don't need it. And we'll give this a color of green, let's just say, since that seems to be our theme. And now we have some green text. Okay. So hopefully I've showed you a few more things with cascading style sheets, and I need to end this in order to keep the movie size manageable. So I'm going to stop it here, and then we will pick up next time and talk a little bit more about this menu on the left hand side. Okay? So I hope you enjoyed it and learned something. Bye.